How you guys doing? All right. Welcome. Give me a second. Sorry to undo your microphone. Hello, greetings. Thank you so much for coming. Before you guys hear a bunch of my music tonight, I wanted to talk with you about what it is that makes music effective. What do we love about film and television and video game music and musical theater music? Why does it stick with us? Because this is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. You know, ever since I was a kid, and I would, I'd hear just a few notes, something like, "Wow, that is a wonderful sound." Hold on, there we go. Something like "Ooh, that's cool." 5 notes. Oh, there we go. Yeah. It only uses 3 notes. Can you go even less? It's 2 notes. These are the thoughts that kept me awake at night when I was a kid. So as I started writing music for film and television, I started thinking about what it is about certain pieces of music that really resonate with me. And I think I kept coming back to this idea of melody. There's all different kinds of aspects to music. You can have harmony, you can have color and rhythms and different sounds and lyrics if it's being sung. But there is something about melody that, for me, takes the best of all of those different musical aspects and combines it into something that our brains are conditioned to remember. We all remember melodies from certain times in our lives, popular songs that take us back to youth, or melodies that we remember from film and television or other media. But I started realizing, like, a composer working in a media can create this nostalgic connection within the media itself. I don't need to write a melody that you will remember for the rest of your lives. It'd be awesome if I could do that. But I don't need to. I just need to write a melody that you're going to remember for the next 2 hours if you're in a movie, or the next few weeks if you're watching a show, so that you start to build these associations with those melodies, and then it creates this nostalgic connection. And it becomes something that you start to associate with certain things, right? So if I write a theme for a particular character, I'm going to start teaching you over the course of the project, over the course of the media, what that character's theme is. Sometimes it can be something very simple, like I did a video game called God of War, and most of the theme, was permeated by but most of the score was permeated by a couple of melodies. Just even those 3 notes. It just created something that I taught the gamer, in this case, over and over, to expect that it would tell you something. And there's those 3 notes again in the beginning, and then the next phrase does it again. And then it does it again. Now I'm just having fun. So I want to talk in particular about one score that I worked on that I found this particularly challenging. This was a score for a television series called The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So most of the time when I do a television show, the themes that I have to generate in the beginning tend to be about 4 or 5 of them, and then I might accumulate a couple more. You might end up with 10 themes that can help you kind of navigate even something as ambitious as Battlestar Galactica. And I started writing down this list at the beginning of the Rings of Power. How many themes am I going to need? And the list came out to 17 themes, which I just thought was crazy. It was way too many. I thought there's no way I can write that many. There's no way the audience can keep track of that many. But as I was looking into the drama and finding all the different characters that the show is asking you to follow, all the different story arcs the show is asking you to follow, I thought, I don't know. I think I might actually need this. So I started thinking about ways that I could make themes that were memorable and effective in telling you something about these characters. And this was the crucial part, how do I set them apart? If I'm writing 17 themes, they all need to be pretty different so that you can quickly understand which theme you're listening to. And of course, going back to those scores by John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith and Elmer Bernstein that I grew up admiring, I realized how efficient they were. All those examples I played you in the beginning were John Williams. He's telling it so quickly, and it doesn't get any quicker than 2 notes. So I thought, all right, what if I can look at Jaws? Let me see if I can do make themes that have the first 2 notes are enough to tell you who you're listening to. So I started thinking about intervals. This is going to get a little nerdy, but hang with me, okay? Intervals is the space between 2 notes. That is one interval. That's a different one. These are all. You can hear there's different emotional intensity into each of these. So let's start with a simple one. I already played Superman. There's something very solid about the perfect fifth, with the fourth on top. And I thought about this character in the show named Nori Brandyfoot, who's this very positive, optimistic, adventurous young hobbit in our show. And I thought I would start with the fifth. She would be our heroine who gets the fifth. So I'm going to play a little bit of this and keep an ear out to how often you hear those intervals. Right away, right there. So, if you listen, those first 2 intervals, I'm doing it twice in a row. Like, don't miss this. The perfect fifth is Nori's theme. And I find it very, very, very hopeful. And the perfect fifth is a very common interval, so certainly you'll hear it in other places. But there is something about the way that all of Nori's music is built around this. So let's pick another interval. It's a little less common. Let's do, instead of the fifth, let's do that. It's called the minor 7. this is much more distinct already. And in the Rings of Power, most of the time when you hear this, it's followed by Galadriel's theme. So I'm going to play Galadriel's theme. Listen to how often that interval is being given to you and framed in a way that it's like your brain is picking up how important it is. Did you guys hear it? So I find that sounds like a character to me that is, yes, like Nori, optimistic, but there's more going on. I think there's more pain here. These chords are a little more unusual. And it's just a little more layered and complex melody for a more layered and complex character. And I find, as I'm working on it, it's, she might not even be in the scene and someone starts mentioning Galadriel, and then, I can have the cello just, and it's like your brain just goes, it goes back to all those other moments you've heard her theme. In fact, I noticed some angry fan commented on social media that in the first episode alone, they were like, Bear quoted the Galadriel theme 18 times in the first episode. And I was like, you say that like it's a bad thing, Like, you obviously recognize the Galadriel theme. Good for you. Congrats. All right, let's go even a little weirder. I love this. What about this? Ugh, that's awful. This is the major 7. When I was in school, my teacher would, my theory teacher would use melodies, to teach you intervals, and that's how you would memorize them. And I was taught that there's no melody in popular music or scoring that a mainstream audience knows. It starts with a major 7. So they said the only way to remember that one is to remember Somewhere Over the Rainbow. You just skip the first note. And I remember thinking, like, one day I'm going to write a theme in a popular thing, and I will start it with a major 7. All right, so how do you do that? Well, there was a character that I wanted to create a strong sense of mystery. I didn't want, we didn't know where this character's from. The character doesn't know where the character's from. And I realized that I could maybe figure out how to do this. And it's all about contextualizing what these notes mean to each other. Do you guys hear it in there? So I guarantee you, if you hear a cello in the Rings of Power, play those two notes. The next notes are... it was really fun. And I found that it's so evocative and so otherworldly. But I loved the challenge of finding a way to make something beautiful out of that melody, out of that first interval. Let's try something smaller. So the perfect fourth is very, to me, it's like very stout and it's very strong. And I started thinking about the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, who are a mighty, industrious people. And listen to how many times their theme floats around this interval. So if you listen there, I'm just living right there in that perfect fourth so often. And while that is a fairly common interval, it is something that, I leaned on a lot to kind of create this sense of a diminutive power there in Khazad-dûm. So one of the things I started noticing as I was writing all these themes, and I've noticed this about all my music, is that when I want you to like someone, their theme opens upward. Every one of these starts up. Or there's, a half dozen others. The minor sixth. Arondir and Bronwyn's theme. They're all very, I find them aspirational, right? Like when I hear that, I look upward. Okay, so what about characters that we want to have more conflicted feelings about? This is where I started thinking about themes moving downward. So I think one of the biggest tasks as I started scoring the Lord of the Rings of Power, was coming up with a theme for Sauron, the creator of our, Rings of Power. And so I started thinking about themes moving downward, and I started gravitating toward this little shape. It's essentially a minor third and a second minor third. And look at that. It forms a ring, forms this little circle. And there's another little circle. And another one. And another one. And another one. And even his little riff that motors underneath that is also built from all these little circular figures that sort of reinforce that he is obsessed with, ultimately making rings. you can hear how this simple shape is just built into everything, right? And it's relentless. And it tells you about this character's obsession. I think that the fact that you don't know if it's in major or minor means you just don't trust this character. There's something very deeply unsettling about that. So I had another challenge as I wrote this. There's another character theme that season that I wanted related to the Sauron theme in a very subtle way. So I had to write these two themes at the same time. And I got the idea that maybe I could take the first phrase of Sauron's theme and play it backwards. And then you would get another character's theme. So the first thing I tried was, okay, let's turn that backwards. I mean, it's still that minor third and that minor third. It's still really dissonant. It feels like almost like the same melody still. It's so symmetrical. So then I thought, well, what if I can cheat it a little bit, just a little bit, and I'll change one of these notes. Ooh. Okay, now that I can work with. This can be recontextualized. So hopefully that sounds pretty different to your ear. And yet, over time, I think your brain starts to soak in that, like, many characters have these, larger leaps. And then this one, it's a more contained, it's like one note away. So this was, I spent the first close to 2 months on, my first 2 months on the Rings of Power was just trying to write all these different themes. And sometimes when one of them would turn out a certain way, I would realize like, it sounds too similar to this other one. So I'd have to go change that one. And then that one would sound too similar to that one. So I had to go change that one. And so I spent a good 6 weeks just coming up with themes that I thought could tell the story and tell you discrete information about each character. So with that in mind, one of the things I think it might be fun for you to do tonight is you're listening to a whole bunch of melodies that I've written over the last 20 years. But think about what each of those melodies is doing and how efficiently it's doing it, because that is the way that I like to think about things. The themes that I grew up listening to were ones that you can identify in a couple of notes. And if it takes more than that for you to figure out what the theme is, those are not the melodies that stick with me. That's just the way my brain is wired. So I'm always striving to write melodies that are memorable and stand out. And to me, those first couple of notes, those are so important, to be able to get an audience to connect with it just immediately and intrinsically and on a subconscious level. So I can keep playing, I can keep messing around with stuff. I did want to know, I can kind of open this up to Q&A. And I would like to know, if you guys have questions, just throw your hands up. Let me know, because I also want to know what you guys want to know. Yes? Oh, that's the fun part. I mean, modulating, meaning changing key, is just a great way to add a new perspective. Like if you look at so many of the themes that I've written, God of War and Masters of the Universe and so many of the ones in Rings of Power. It's just a way of like creating a fresh new perspective. It shakes the dust off. Honestly, whenever a composer gets stuck and they're like, oh, I wrote this thing and I don't know what to do with it, I say, take it up a minor third. You're in C minor, you know, like if you're here, then just, you know, come back. Whoa! It feels fun. The other thing that happens is that as you work more with live instruments, there's a range in which instruments sound the best and project the best. So I often use modulations when I go, I want this to start. I'm revealing all my tricks now because like so many themes are like, I want to start with like a solo instrument in a nice comfortable range, and I want to end where the French horns are ridiculously loud at the top of their range, but not too high because they get weak, but just that bullseye perfect note. So I will modulate in such a way, often just to get to the right key for the French horns. But yeah, that's more, to me, more of something that happens after you've got a melody to start messing around with. That was super nerdy, though. Thank you. I love it. Who else? Anybody have any other questions? Yes. Yes. So I was the final protege of Elmer Bernstein, one of the great film composers of all time, whose credits include To Kill a Mockingbird, The Great Escape, The Ten Commandments, The Magnificent Seven, Animal House, Ghostbusters, Far From Heaven, The Age of Innocence, Cape Fear. It goes on and on, the remake of Cape Fear. He gave me a lot of advice. I will say that most of what I learned from him was life lessons. I met him when I was 16, and I didn't know any film composers. I'd never met one. Hell, I'd hardly seen a photograph of one. And I didn't know if that was a life that I could have. And I met this man who was so interested in the work that I was doing, and yet he had this incredible career. He had this beautiful house and a beautiful family and a great relationship with his kids, and people in the industry respected him. And I just thought, that, I want that. I will take that, thank you. But I will say there's another thing he taught me, a very practical thing that I use almost every day. And that is a way of communicating with filmmakers. As a composer, I am making music, writing notes, but I can't talk about music with the people that hire me. They do not have the verbiage. They do not have the ability to say, would you modulate there, please? I would look at them very suspiciously if they said that. Elmer taught me what to ask them. If you're ever confused, sometimes a filmmaker will say, make it more purple. You know, or they'll be like, you know, it just needs to be funnier. And it's like a scene with somebody just like dying or something. And you're like, when you are confused, Elmer said, there's only one thing you need to ask. What do you want the audience to feel? That is the director's sole job. That is the filmmaker's sole job. Fundamentally, that's my job. That's it. How I do that is a thing that is personal and hard to explain. But I have found that no matter how confused or frustrated a filmmaker gets, when I say, okay, what do we want the audience to feel here? Immediately, they'll give me the answer. They will know at every frame of their film, I want them to be scared, but I want them to be thinking about the thing that happened 3 scenes ago. Or sometimes it's a total surprise. You'll be like, I want them to be laughing, and it's just not funny, right? And you're like, oh, you think this is funny? Oh, okay. So that very tangible trick, I mean, I don't use it every day, but at least once a week in talking with someone, I'm so grateful to Elmer. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Anytime you're confused, anytime you feel like you're not sure what to do, what do you want the audience to feel? What else? Yes. She's asking about the Elvish language in the Rings of Power. One of the complicating factors in creating music for the Lord of the Rings is there are 6 languages that the text appears in, which are all, need to be canonically accurate. These are not real world languages, but they are languages that Tolkien invented. We have a number of ways of doing it. Sometimes I'll, for example, if I write something, I'll start with the rhythm, like a... That kind of thing I will write, and I will make notes and say it has to be this rhythm. It's so important. Ba 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 bum 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 bum. It can't be ba 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 da ba 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 ba. Like for the lyrics. In other cases, we start with the lyrics. In the case of Golden Leaves, we started with the lyrics. In that case, J.D. Payne, one of the showrunners, wrote into the script that Gil Galad would sing a song, and he had written a text in English that was inspired by drawing a lot of lines from a song in Fellowship of the Ring, I believe. I'm not going to quote it. I think it was a Galadriel song. Anyway, I don't remember. Someone will correct me at some point. It's on my blog, too. I just forgot. But then we translated that into Elvish, and then I had the syllable count. And then I wrote that melody for the actor, Ben Walker, because that in that case it is about preserving that exact text. So it just depends on the needs. But maybe I should have started with the fact that every vocal cue that you hear in that score, every soloist, every choral passage, every chant, every grunt in the score is there's a lyric that has been very carefully thought out there. The lyric is in a language that is appropriate to what you're seeing, and if you translate it, the meaning is appropriate to what you are seeing. And that is a huge effort, a huge team effort to be able to do that. There's at least 4 or 5 people that are, when I finish writing, I'll put in my notes like, it should be this, and it's like they go off and we'll work on it for days and be able to bring it back so we can get it into the score in time for the choirs and singers to learn it. What else? Yes. Yeah, rhythm is incredibly important. And in a weird way, I sort of like ghost brought it into the whole thing that you've been hearing, because you can't have a melody without rhythm, right? So rhythm is incredibly important to me. And it's another element that I think about communicating information. I think the Khazad-dûm theme and even Kratos' theme in God of War have this very steady, plodding, consistent foundation, a rhythmic, bum bum bum, bum bum bum. It just grounds you, Whereas something that's like boom, bum, ba 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 bum, ba ba boom, ba ba bow, bow, boom, bow. Like that's cool, but it's not Kratos, right? I don't know what the fuck that is. So, I know. So I'm always trying to find the simplest rhythm and something that will, sort of ground you. I also use symmetry. I didn't point it out. But in the Sauron theme, this is in 7. It's uneven. And then when his theme comes in, the melody, that's in 4, back to 7. So if you were like marching along, it would just be like, wait. It is jagged and disconcerting and not centered and strong the way that the Khazad-dûm marches. So rhythm is incredibly important. I mean, it's almost like, this feeling is like the first thing we experience as humans, and that sense of percussion and of rhythm is like ingrained in our brains, probably more so even than pitch. There was a question right near you. Yes. Yeah. So in Battlestar Galactica's third season, there was a version of Bob Dylan's classic All Along the Watchtower. Um, I kept hearing as I was working on the show that we were going to need a cover of All Along the Watchtower, or that All Along the Watchtower was going to appear in some way. And at that point, I didn't see the showrunner, Ron Moore, all that often because I was just doing my thing and I would send him music and I would get some notes. It's not like we didn't spend a lot of time talking. But I kept hearing this. The editors would call me and be like, hey, so what are you going to do about Watchtower? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I caught Ron in the hall. And he was walking past me. He's like, hey, Bear. And I go, Ron, wait. Is there All Along the Watchtower in Battlestar Galactica? And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, what do you want it to sound like? And he was like, oh, make it sound like Battlestar. And he turned and he walked away. So I thought this was a rare opportunity to have some fun. I thought that my brother was flying back. This was in December. He had just gotten back from our parents' house. He got off a plane, and I said, hey, man, let's do a demo. And I sequenced out this idea that was like Bob Dylan meets George Harrison meets Indian folk music meets Rage Against the Machine. This was my idea. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to have fun with this. No one will tolerate me putting this in Battlestar Galactica. But I'll at least know there was a cool version floating around, and it'll make a fun story. That demo is virtually indistinguishable from the final version. I mean, Brendan sang it. My brother sang it. That lick was born out of that. Ultimately, was sort of written into the narrative in the fourth season in a way that was really cool. But it was a very organic process. And I learned then what I have repeated on many, many projects. I was talking with a fan earlier about how I got to do a death metal song with the lead singer of Meshuggah in Lord of the Rings, you guys. Because I learned with Watchtower, always come out of the gate with a bold idea. If you have a bold idea, just do it and don't overthink it. Don't over-explain it. In some cases, don't even tell them you're gonna do it because they'll tell you no. They'll say, if I said, hey, can I do a death metal song in Lord of the Rings? The answer is no. But if I go, hey, check out this thing Jens and I did, then it becomes easier for people. So I'm always grateful to Battlestar Galactica. Among the billion things I learned working on that show, that was one of them. What else? Anything else? Yes, over there. It can go any number of ways. It depends on when I'm hired, first and foremost. I want to see the most current thing. So if you hire me on your film and you haven't shot it yet, but you have a script and maybe a lookbook with some concept art, well, if you want to get started, let's do that. Show me that. If you hire me and your cut is almost finished, I'm not going to bother reading your script, right? It's like, just show me the most complete version because everybody along the way contributes. I generally don't like to read scripts because then I am taking the place of the director, the cinematographer, the editor, the actor, the costumer, the lighting designer. I'm taking agency away from all of them and I'm doing it myself. And then I'm like, oh, I'll do this. When all of them contribute to making a movie, right? So when you get this tremendous advantage in being able to look at something where all of those people have done their work, and now it really is time for that last step. In terms of instruments and all that stuff, I just go back to what I learned from Elmer. What do you want the audience to feel? It's really, really dangerous to start being like, what instruments do you like? And if somebody says like, I like brass or I like guitars or whatever they say, it's still a red flag for me. And my next thing I'll go, yeah, I love that. what is it about that sound? What do you feel? Why do you like brass, or why do you like guitars? And then they start talking about how they feel. And of course, I'll log it away. Like, okay, they said they like guitars, but that doesn't mean they actually do, right? Talking about music is so difficult for even for me. So I'm always very hesitant to be very direct. It's like I was saying with the Watchtower question. My philosophy is, tell me what you want the audience to feel. I'm going to go make a mock-up. I might even bring in some of my friends. I'll bring my brother in to sing, whatever. I'm going to present you with a presentation that actually sounds like what the score is going to sound like. So now we're not talking about it in a vacuum. We're not talking about it in a sort of hypothetical. Do you like what you are hearing? And you can give me very concrete feedback. So that's the balancing act. How much information do I take in it up front that will inform me versus, making sure that I'm still following my instincts to a degree and able to present something that the filmmaker will like. Anything else? Yes. Man, I've had opportunity to meet so many of my heroes. Maybe one of my idols growing up was Basil Polidorus, which, if you know Basil's music and you know my music, should not surprise anyone. He didn't give me any advice, but it was so great. I snuck into a film school event. I had to hop a fence because he was giving a presentation at the film school at the university where I was going. I just wanted to shake his hand and just to be able to breathe the air in the room that he was in. You know what I mean? That was so inspiring. And then there was another time he was conducting a youth choir singing Hunt for Red October. And I can hold a tune now, but I was not a choral singer then. And I sort of snuck into the choir just because I knew that he would be there. And at the gig, so I got to talk with him a couple of times. And I fumbled my way through the high tenor parts in Red October. Great tune if you don't know it. I did a lot of just trial by fire. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to ask people for advice because I was 23 when I started Battlestar. And I never talked to anybody about TV. I didn't try to seek out Mike Post and be like, how do you do a TV show? All I knew was I like Jerry Goldsmith's music and Elmer Bernstein, and I have an opportunity here to tell a story, so I'm going to try to do that, with the meager resources that I have. And I connected with many other composers just a little later in my career. I'll give you one last story. I was deep into the Rings of Power, utterly exhausted by the end of episode 6. If you've seen the first season, episode 6 is a monster, and I was like, I need someone to turn to. But I'm under NDA. I've signed a contract. No one knows that I'm even on this show, so I can't call a friend. I can't talk to anybody. And I didn't want to talk to anybody who worked on the show because it would be I didn't want them to think I'm burning out, which I was burning out. But then I realized I could call Howard Shore because Howard Shore worked on the show. He did our main title. He had signed the same contract I had signed. So I was like, I'll just call Howard. So I called Howard, and I was like, hey, man, what's it like when you're burned out on Lord of the Rings? And he was great. He was very helpful. It was just great to hear his voice again and sort of chat with him about that. So that was fun. It's generally been more of a sort of social support group kind of situation. What else? Anyone who hasn't yet? Yes. Where the Shadows Lie from the first season of Rings of Power is based on the famous Ring verse, which, has not been set in any mainstream adaptation of Lord of the Rings. When I discovered this, when it really hit me, like, well, how come no one's done that? You know, it's so obvious. It's probably, I'm just going to say probably the most famous poem Tolkien ever wrote. It was tricky only because, you know, it's basically a declaration from Sauron. It's a declaration of war. And yet, I knew I wanted to have a female voice sing it, partly to sort of honor the tradition of the first 3 films that Peter Jackson did, and also just because it would be cool, right? I thought that'd be really cool. And I wrote this tune, and I think the difficult part was then hoping I could find the right person to sing it. And I was very fortunate to collaborate with Fiona Apple, who is like, if you needed the musical female personification of Sauron, it's like she was the top of my list. So that was really cool. But you know, for a hot minute there, we weren't sure who was going to sing it, and I wasn't sure what would happen. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions? Yes. I choose the harmony first. I'm very, very. I don't like writing tunes without some foundation. So, like the Galadriel theme. I mean, I guarantee you the first thing I wrote was this. All right, that's nice. There's a billion themes that go there. A few that go there. Very few that go there. So suddenly, this all but guarantees you're going to come up with something interesting, right? Like if your theme, if your chords were, it's cool, but like there's a 1,000 melodies that could go over that. So, you know, from there to get to this, also I have these guide points. I like interesting notes. Interesting notes are notes that the bass line is not playing. So if you look at what I'm doing, the number of times that the low note and the high note are the same, it's just at the end. And I'm going to interesting notes. So check this out. We start off with a suspension right out of the gate, right? Major 7. I fucking love that. Now, up an octave. 9. Ugh. It's just a third, but it's a third on the chord that is a half step above the tonic. Implied suspension. And now check this out. The bass line has moved to the third. That's to the fifth now. And now you get the unison. Suspension again. Same chords. And now a minor 7. Notice the bass line moves up. Suspension. The third. I'm going to go back to that delicious chord. And now at the very end, you've waited. The tonic, the melody, and the bass line are the same. So that melody, it's almost like it when you create a cool chord progression and you say, okay, I want to find as many interesting notes over these cool chords. I mean, it's hard to write a boring melody, right? In that situation. So sorry if that got too technical, you guys, but that is how I do it. What else? I got time for a couple more. Yes, in the back. For me, it doesn't feel different at all to work on a game or a TV show or a movie because fundamentally, I'm only asking one question: what do you want the audience to feel? I've never scored like a Mario Kart or like FIFA or some shit, you know. Like I could do it, probably. But when I met on God of War, Cory Barlog, the director, said, this is the story of an estranged father and son. And they're grieving over the loss of the wife and mother, whose dying wish was to take her ashes to the highest peak in all the realms. And during that journey, they're going to learn things about each other, and the father is going to overcome his inherent fear about being honest with his son. And I was like, well, I can do that. That's just a movie. Elmer Bernstein could score this. The technical aspects of like, okay, how do you get into combat music, all this stuff, is so much easier than writing a piece of music that can make you feel the story that I just told you. That's the hard part. Getting that to fit into a game, like your game developers will help you do that. You'll get an instinct for how to do that. That's why I spend, months working on those themes. In the case of God of War, I spent a year just writing those melodies. I got time for one more, you guys. Anything else? Yes. Not really. I find when I take something on, I'm taking it on because it is inspiring me. I'm not giving it something. It's the other way around. It's like, oh, you've got this movie about it's about a kidnapping, and it takes place in Cuba, and it's like, what do I know about Afro-Cuban? Oh, and there's like, maybe you want, it's very modern, like maybe some synths. So I'm already thinking things. If for some reason I go, oh, I happen to have an Afro-Cuban synth-based thriller score just sitting here, maybe. It's just never happened. Oh, well, yes, that is just my taste, right? Like let's see. All right, so what was I saying about first two notes, right? These two, it's called a chromatic mediant, but all you need to know, it's two major chords that don't normally go together. All right, let's take a listen to Numenor. It's the same vibe. It's not even the same chords, but I am starting with these very positive, uplifting, major chords. So I don't intentionally recycle ideas, but I am myself, right? And so there's certain things that I gravitate towards because I think they're very useful in telling the story. And one other thing to think about is, why did I do that? In the case of Da Vinci's Demons, I think Da Vinci's a very aspirational, fun character and a fascinating real-life person. And in the case of Numenor, I'm creating something so positive. So it's almost all major chords. Because I knew in the long run of the show, I'm going to start changing those chords. And you're going to hear that less and less. And you start hearing it like this. It's such a simple trick, but honestly, if you're caught up on season 2, you might not hear that major third in Numenor again. Sorry. All right, thanks, you guys. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you so much for coming. Do you have graphic novels for them? I also, among the many things that I have done, I've created a graphic novel for my rock record, The Singularity, and you guys are free to get a copy on your way out the door if you would like one. So thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the show. I'll see you out there. Thank you.